Historical Society for TPS workshops and for other things that we've done together. And we welcome any of you all that have not been here. We are in downtown Knoxville across from the Tennessee Theater, and we have the East Tennessee History Center there that has a lot of great archival materials, a library, museum, the Museum of East Tennessee History, and lots of other partners here that have just about everything you would want for East Tennessee history and the region's history, state, and beyond. So we welcome anybody that wants to come. The museum is open. We're taking lots of precautions and trying to be very conscientious, but we do welcome visitors to the museum if you are through Knoxville and want to stop by and visit. But we also know that especially for school groups and for teachers and families, you're having to do a lot of things, not only in your classroom, but virtually with students. And so we're really trying to develop more to offer for students in particular and for teachers to use online. So we actually created an ETHS education Facebook page. And that's exactly, you just search for ETHS education on Facebook. And we try to do about 3 to 4 posts. A couple of things might be just shares of interesting information, but then we try to create some posts that might be interesting that kind of address interesting topics from East Tennessee and Tennessee as they relate to the standards. And that's really designed and has a look for the kids to enjoy. You can also find our just regular East Tennessee Historical Society Facebook page, and we also try to keep very active with that. Our YouTube channel has some virtual visits that we've been conducting over the past few months, and what we've been doing is actually hosting a visit to, say, Fort Loudon or the birthplace of country music, or we're getting ready tomorrow at 1 o'clock. If anybody wants to join us, we are going via Zoom and Facebook. On our regular Facebook page, we'll be streaming a visit to the Abraham Lincoln Museum at LMU in Harrogate, and Natalie Sweet is going to be talking to us about the museum and about the history of the museum as well as the history of LMU. And so this is something we felt like that is a signature of the Historical Society, is reaching out and getting people out to the region. And we can't do that physically, but we thought, well, we could still do it virtually. So all of those are on our YouTube channel. So you can go to East TN History on YouTube and find, we have recorded those, and you might want to use those in your classroom because a lot of them will relate to standards and things that you're doing, and none of them are really over 20-30 minutes for the actual portion where the person presents. We also have some other material there, some lectures and other things, but those virtual visits are a lot of fun. And we're hoping after the first of the year to develop a series of small video clips that will not only introduce folks to the primary sources in our collection, but also work with Kira and Stacy and Layla to identify resources through TPS and see how they fit with our museum artifacts, and do some little story snippets on video to post, as well as to show the kids where these things live now and take them into the areas where the documents are stored or where we have artifacts stored, and so that they can talk to the people that actually take care of the primary sources. So we have lots of ideas, and if you have any ideas that you would like to share or a place you would like to visit, I think that's something else that we can open up, is say if somebody would like to visit a certain location, then other people would probably like to go too, and we can set a virtual visit up to go and visit that place and have classrooms join us as well as record it for use later. So that's kind of what we're doing at the Historical Society to try to bridge the gap virtually. And hopefully, fingers crossed, next fall we'll be able to host school groups back in our building. But let me just say how excited we've been with this opportunity, even though our numbers, we're not able to see each other and we might not be able to do things in the same way as before. It sure is great to see folks from all over the state attend our webinars, and It's nice to meet those of you all that are in West Tennessee, in Middle Tennessee, and we hope to continue to be able to offer virtual resources from the East Tennessee Historical Society for you. So welcome, and we look forward to seeing you all back at our place soon as we can, but I'll turn it over to Kira.
Thank you, Lisa. So again, I want to welcome everyone and really excited to have you with us today. So I'm pulling up my PowerPoint slide here. So today's topic for our webinar is Manifest Destiny. And so we're going to be exploring, a couple of different lesson activities that you can do that are available on our website, and then also sharing some different resources available both from our Teaching with Primary Sources program as well as with the Library of Congress today. As always with our webinars, we do hope that they are interactive. And we are also, of course, recording these. We are live streaming this today on our Facebook page, and then we will be posting this later on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, if you would mute your mic, we would appreciate that. And then also if you would rename yourself with your first and last name on the participant list, and that just helps us to kind of know who's talking in the chat box. And of course, make use of that chat box. You can ask us questions, bring up points throughout today's presentation using the chat feature. You also have reaction buttons. There's a hands clapping and a thumbs up if you want to use that. If you're participating live with us via Zoom. If you're watching via Facebook, feel free to comment in the comment box there, and we're also monitoring and we'll be responding there as well. And we will be doing a polling question today for those of you on the Zoom with us. So one small bit of housekeeping, if you would complete the contact form for us, this just helps us with our reporting requirement from the Library of Congress and ensures that you're added to our email list. So for those of you that are live with us on Zoom, the contact link is in the chat box, so you can find that there. And if, for folks who just joined, if someone will reshare that there, that will help get you access to that without having to type it from the screen here. So as we are getting started with today's session, I want you to think about the question about what comes to mind when you hear the term manifest destiny. What are there key people? Are there key places? What really just kind of pops in your mind when you see the word manifest destiny pop up, in your curriculum and the standards, wherever that might be? If you would kind of go ahead and drop that in the chat box for us. So kind of words and phrases that come to mind when you hear the term manifest destiny. So what our future holds. That's a good way of thinking about helping students to define it, because I think this can be a complicated term for our students. Anybody else? What comes to mind when you hear the term manifest destiny? Assimilation and xenophobia. One thing that pops in my mind a lot is thinking about, of course, the desire, always the desire for more land. And so where do we go to find more land? And rationalization for U.S. expansion, that's another good way to think about it. It's that trek across the West. All right, so again, thinking about that as a term will kind of get us started for today's session. So our plan today is we're going to be looking at two different activities. The first one we're going to look at is an activity called I Hear America Singing, and it looks at music from the Mexican-American War. So that's going to be the first one, and then we're going to look at a close reading exercise, James K. Polk and Manifest Destiny. So it's again two different activities you could do with your students. And then we'll close out with looking at some additional resources that are available to both speak directly to kind of this early period that our activities look at, but then also look at kind of the longer legacy of Manifest Destiny. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Layla, who's going to take us through our first activity.
All right. Hi, guys. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. Okay, cool. So hopefully everybody can see that. Can you see that? Okay, perfect. All right, cool. So we're going to be working on a lesson plan. It's a lesson plan that was created by teacher Rebecca Bird. We kind of modified it for this activity. So we're going to look at sheet music and lyrics. And then at the end, as a treat, we're going to listen to a little bit of music too. All right, so let's get started. Before I start this, so I do want to show you guys where to find the lesson plan. I probably should have done that first. Let me stop this share and do a new share so I can show you where to find this. So this lesson plan is on our website, library.mtsu.edu/tps/home. So if you just go to our homepage, you're going to be able to find this lesson plan and work along with us. So if you just go to lesson plans, Colonial America to Civil War, right here on this drop-down menu, and then go to Westward Expansion. The lesson plan is right here. I Hear America Singing Controversy and Music in the Mexican-American War. And then the lyrics that we'll be listening to and reading, if you want to read along on your own, we have a primary source packet right here that you can click on, and it'll have those lyrics so you can read them on your own if you'd like, or you can follow along with us. So just really quickly, how to find this, where to get your resources, what we're going to be using today. All right, let me do a new share with you all now. Moving around. Okay, cool. Wait, I want to see everybody. I can't see anybody's screen now. Oh, well. All right, guys. So thank you for joining us today. Like I said, we're going to work with song lyrics. We're going to be analyzing a few sets of song lyrics from the Mexican-American War. But before we do that, we kind of started this together. But before you do that, we started this together with Kira. I want to review this time period. We talked about Manifest Destiny, but there's a lot going on in this time period, like 1830s to 1850. This time period in American history, what's happening? In the chat box, could you kind of give me some ideas of what events are happening? Who are prominent figures during this time? What attitudes were driving decisions and policies? We've already talked about Manifest Destiny. Who's involved in conflicts happening? So just in the chat box, take a minute or two and like brainstorm on this for me. What's happening in this time period? Ooh, yeah, the Second Great Awakening. Good. We have these religious revivals shaking the nation. What else? Texas Revolution. Good. Gold Rush, which means people are like flocking west. Good. Industrial growth and technology innovations, right? Technological innovations, excuse me. So we have a lot of different things going on. Oregon Trail, Santa Fe Trail, the Indian Removal Act, excuse me. Good. So we have a lot of like different things happening that all speak to American expansion and growth. Good. Who was involved in conflicts during this time? Somebody said the Indian Removal Act. So we obviously have like the Cherokee Nation and the American government kind of involved. What else? The Dred Scott decision. Good. So we have the Supreme Court and abolitionists kind of going head to head as well. We have free soilers and enslavers or large planters trying to get those lands, get the land that's, I guess, west at the time. Good. Russians in California. I didn't know that. Okay, cool. So we have a lot of different influences. We have the Mexican-American War happening in the 1840s as well, and Alaska. That does make sense. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the Mexican-American War today. And like I said, looking at those lyrics and speaking to perceptions of the Mexican-American War. Good. All right, I'm going to go on now. So as we read these lyrics, and like I said, to get to this lesson plan, just go to our homepage and lesson plans. British Oregon, the British were in the Oregon Territory. That's true, right? We have Polk 5440 or fight. We're trying to get there. Good. So we're going to read these lyrics today, and we're going to consider, after reading and listening to these lyrics, is this song pro-war or anti-war? So what's the view of this song? What are they trying to sway you to think? And in what way does this song encourage or discourage Americans to support the war effort? So I want you, as we're doing this, to think about these questions. We're going to read lyrics to two different songs. I want you to also remember to consider the cover art and the dedication as well. So if you're looking at those lyric packets where I showed you where this lesson plan is located on the TPS lesson plan page, pull up those lyric packets and follow along. I'm also going to pull it up on my screen so you can look at that as well if you don't want to pull it up on your own. But as you're listening to these lyrics, in the chat box, answer these questions for me. Is this song pro-war, anti-war? In what ways does this song encourage or discourage Americans to support the war effort? Think about why these songs were created. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do a new share for you guys. Okay. All right, guys, so here is our first song. Remember, these are all revolving around the Mexican-American War. Let's just give a little bit of context because I forgot about that. The Mexican-American War is a conflict between the United States and Mexico. It's going to be fought from April 1846 to February of 1848. It's going to actually stem from the annexation of the Republic of Texas. So we have a lot of like confrontation happening surrounding Texas. Where does Texas end and where does Mexico begin? That kind of thing. So there's a lot of dispute over whether Texas ended at a certain river or so where it ends. So we have one river and we have another river called the Rio Grande, and we're trying to decide which claim is correct. So this is all kind of stemming from that Texas annexation and border disputes. Okay, so our first song we're going to read is called The Death of Ringgold. So this song is composed in 1857. And let's just look at this cover art really quickly. Get an idea if you all can see that. Okay, so notice it says with great expression. So I'm not going to sing this for you guys. I'm just going to read it for you. Oh, heard ye that shout, we have conquered the foe. How it rings and reaches o'er mountains and plains, but alas, with it mingles the sad note of woe. A hero has perished brave. Brave Ringgold is slain. A hero has perished, brave Ringgold is slain. And then we have our other stanzas. They have laid him to rest on a far distant shore where the Rio del Norte in his majesty flows, and millions of freemen his loss will deplore and weep o'er the spot where his ashes repose. Though dimmed in the eye of the hero forever, though dimmed is the eye of the hero forever, and hushed is his voice in the stillness of death, his spirit will hover around those who never deserted their leader till life's latest breath. When round them hell the death storm shall rattle, and the war cloud and darkness envelop the plain, his voice will be heard o'er the din of the battle, till victory perch on their banners again. His name shall live on when the struggle has ceased and grim-visaged war from our borders has flown. When the era of freedom has so far increased that its bounds can be traced to the ocean alone. So I'm going to kind of leave these here for a minute, and I want you guys in the chat box to tell me, is this pro or anti-war? What are the lyrics to the song? What do you think? Okay, Wayne says pro-war. Amy, pro, cool. Why do you think it's pro-war? What about the lyrics makes you think that? Glorification. Good. Continuing on to victory. Good. Anything else in these lyrics make you think this might be pro-war? Yeah. Is that better? Okay. Yeah, no problem. Are there any words in this, the lyrics, like any specific lyrics or words that stick out to you to make you think this is glorifying war? Those last two lines, when the era of freedom has so far increased that its bounds can be traced on the ocean alone. Well, if that doesn't scream manifest destiny, I don't know what does, right? Till victory, good. It describes the martyrs of war. Good. We're saying they're heroes, the fallen heroes. Good. His name shall live on when the struggle has ceased. The idea that being a war hero will give you a legacy that lives on longer than you will. Good. So we would say this is definitely pro-war. Nice. So when we're doing this with our students, of course, we're going to spend more time breaking down these lyrics, understanding or pointing out words that maybe they don't understand or need more explanation on. But this song is The Death of Ringgold. Like you said, yeah, romanticizing the fallen. It's pro-war. It encourages the support for the war by highlighting Ringgold's death, by highlighting one man's death in battle. Did anything about this song stick out to you? Anything? One thing that stuck out to me, and I'll throw this out there, with great expression. So we're singing about a man's death, but with great expression. So that's something kind of stuck out to me. Who is Ringgold? Ringgold is, off the top of my head, if you hadn't asked me, I could have told you. I'm not quite sure. During the battle, Ringgold was mortally wounded by cannon fire that mangled both his legs just below the crotch. Nevertheless, he refused to leave the field during battle. He survived 3 days, during which time he debriefed on the battle before dying in Port of Isabel, Texas. His name is Samuel Ringgold, and he was a United States Army officer. Little fun fact for you guys. All right, cool. So we have another song now to look at the lyrics of. And I want you to consider those same questions again. Is this pro or anti-war? What sticks out to you? What makes you think it's either pro-war or anti-war? Things like that. So this song, I'm going to warn you guys, it's a little bit longer, but there's a lot of meaning behind it. So if you want to pull this up and read on your own, that's perfectly fine. But this is called $8 a Day, written and dedicated to the to the Congress of the US. So just keep that in mind as we're going through. All right. So $8 a day. At Washington full once a year do politicians throng, contriving whereby various arts to make their sessions long. And many a reason do they give why they're obliged to stay. But the clearest reason yet adduced is $8 a day. So here's the next one, the next stanza. Just go with me to the Capitol if you really would behold all that imagination craves with more than ever was told. Do you see the city avenue swarms with members grave and gay? And what do you suppose they're thinking of? 'Tis $8 a day. There is an axiom known to all and rather old given, for 'tis a common household phrase and very often seen, that those who are fools enough to dance the fiddler too must pay. So Congress fiddles us the tune of $8 a day. All Washington now is wide awake, and all the big hotels are filled with representatives, and oh, how liquor sells. It cannot well be otherwise, for think you men will pay the national tune without their grog of $8 a day. A startling scene will now be played before the gazing world, for from the nation's capital her banner is unfurled. The congressmen are trudging on, each in his chosen way, and all keep time to the glorious tune of $8 a day. Now the Senate chamber first, then to the House we'll go, and learn a lesson while we may of patriotic throw. The roll is called and quorum formed when the chaplains rise to, I can't see that word, I'm sorry, let me move this. Chaplains rise to pray. And then the national work begins at $8 a day. Then every member takes his seat in the velvet chair of state, thinking that in his dignities embodied the nation's fate. A flaming speech is made by one when the call is yea or nay, but all are agreed when the question comes of $8 a day. And next in order of the day comes the mad cry of war, while very few of the longest heads can hardly tell what's for. But war exists, all parties cry, and the enemy we must slay. So Congress backs the president at $8 a day. And then we'll go back up, down to the last little bit. Then the cry of war runs through the land for volunteers to go and fight in the war for slavery on the plains of Mexico. $7 a month, and to be shot at, that is the common soldier's pay, while those who send the poor fellows there get $8 a day. Thus ring our legislative halls from year to year the same, tariffs and bank and treasury acts and glorious deeds of fame. Our country is great and rich withal, and must be taxed to pay, and Uncle Sam must foot the bill at $8 a day. Oh, there's a little bit more. Sorry, I thought that was it. But a day of reckoning's coming on. Behold the gathering storm. For the people are the sovereign yet, and they demand reform. From north and south, the shout is heard, and Congress must obey, or quit their seats for better men at $8 a day. So what here, do you guys think this is pro-war, anti-war? What do you think? Yeah, I think they're a little ticked off too. Let's see. I don't know. I thought it was Hutchinson, Wayne, but let me scroll up and we can look. Yeah, so this is Jesse Hutchison Jr. As sung in all the concerts of the Hutchison family. Very interesting. Yeah, so we think they're a little mad, very anti-abolitionist satire of the war to protect and expand slavery. And this is a great source to bring in with your students to say, well, enslavement wasn't just an issue during the Civil War, right? We have these events happening regarding expansion because of, or regarding expansion and enslavement. What do we do? I'm going to scroll back down to those lyrics right there. Good. So what in this, yeah, I didn't know. So you got me there. So what in this sticks out to you guys? What, so we said definitely satire. The line talking about Congress rubber stamping the president's words, very interesting. Yes. Good. Do any lyrics stick out to you guys that make this think like, oh, this is definitely anti-war? A flaming speech made when time to vote yay or nay. Yes, we have a lot of those speeches happening at this time. Good. Velvet chair of state. Yes, definitely gives off that like kingly aspect, that monarchy feel. Calling Congress to obey, the cries for change. Good. So, war exists, all parties cry, the enemy we must slay. Stanza 8. Yeah, stanza 8 kind of makes me, as we get into 8 and 9, the very end, makes me kind of have like Les Mis vibes. They're ready to revolt, right? Good. So they're saying this, you guys did really well on this. This song is obviously called $8 a day. It is anti-war and argues that members of Congress are profiting from the war. Not only profiting from the war, but profiting from meeting to discuss and declare war. While the men fighting are being paid like peanuts compared to them. And they're paying the price. The men fighting are not being paid adequately. And they're also losing their lives or being injured for lives, things like that. Yeah, the contrast between monetary sum and the value of life. Good. So we see a lot of different like pokes at the government in this. Good. So both of these, yeah, good. Both of these songs, as well as another one from 1917, are in this lyrics packet here. So I have one more song here. We're not going to go over this other song, but there is another one here. Good. So I'm going to stop my share and go back to my PowerPoint. But good, this is an activity you could really break down with your students as you're doing this, and then just here are the resources. We can post this in the Google Drive folder for you guys too as well. And so with your students in this lesson plan, you can compare their initial thoughts to the nation's reactions about the Mexican-American War. So like, how do you think people reacted, right? And find some primary sources to support or debunk what you think. And then discuss the similarities or differences, either between the song lyrics and the primary sources, between the dates of publication, between the songs and the lyrics. The possibilities here are really kind of endless to discuss these sources, these lyrics with your students. Let's see. All right, guys, so I have 2 more songs to play for you. And we're just going to do this last little activity. So this song is called The Ballad of the Green Berets, and I'm going to share with you guys this one more time, and hopefully you can hear it. Can everybody hear that? Guys, so is this song, looking at those lyrics here, sorry, let me close this. Is this song, what do you think, is this pro or anti? Pro, good. And is this song similar to any of the other songs we listened to or the lyrics we read first? I think it's neither, okay. Very similar to the first. Good. Yeah, so this song, this is the Ballad of the Green Beret, and it is from, the recording is from 1966. So both the Ballad of the Green Beret and the Death of Ringgold, they both focus on the service and sacrifice of one man as an inspiration for others to follow in military service. So a good way to pull this back for your students and connect one time period to another. Good, Silver Rings. Yeah, good catch. It's definitely romanticizing the soldier and the military effort. Good. So the last song we're going to listen to is another song about war. So just hang with me. I'm going to start it and then I'll pull up the lyrics for you. Tapping going on in that one, right? It's hard not to dance to it. I had in my notes, the last song is a catchy tune with a serious message. So good. I see a lot of already messages going in. We see definitely draft went along with socioeconomic lines. Good. Anti-war. Good. Yeah. So a lot of anti-war vibes in this. Silver spoon in hand. I ain't no senator's son. Good. So we're picking out a lot. Yeah, the idea is never enough. How much more? And they said in this, it says, how much should we give? And ooh, they only answer more. So very interesting to see that. So this song is obviously, and if you were doing this with your students, you drag it out a little bit more, but very similar to the $8 a day song from almost 100 years before. No, over 100 years before, excuse me. So Fortunate Son and $8 a day, they both refer to economic differences between those who fight and those who send them to war. Both refer to the monetary cost of war and the collection of taxes to support the war, and this class system pull of who's sending people to war and who's fighting the actual fight. Good. So I'm going to just do one new share with you guys, and then we'll be finished up with this activity. Okay. So in the chat box for me as we finish this up, did you find the pro-war or anti-war songs, either the lyrics or the music, to be more effective at influencing your opinion? In the chat box, let me know. Which one stuck out to you the most? Yeah, it's probably going to depend on how you feel before. So that's going to go along with this question too, and have your students think about it. Which do you think would have been the most effective for people who lived when these songs were first produced? So if you're taking in these songs, depending on what you already believe, it's probably going to be which song you're persuaded by more, which song you are pushed by more. I definitely think the Fortunate Son song is a toe tapper. It gets me wanting to dance more than the others. But yeah, there's really not like a persuasive message one way or the other. It just kind of puts out these ideas. Good. So another way you could present this to your students, why is music such a good medium for expressing opinions during a time of war? And I think we see similar ideas, similar concepts from the Mexican-American War up until Vietnam, right? So we have these similar ideas, similar societal issues, socioeconomic issues that we can see as themes throughout history in America. Yeah, they all touch the culture at some point. Good. So those are just some closing discussion questions. And again, this lesson plan is on our website, and this lyrics handout that I went through with you all is on our website as well. So feel free to use that and modify as you would like. I'm now going to pass it over to Dr. Graham for our closed reading activity. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Layla. Yes, that was that lesson plan has been on our website for many years. Rebecca Bird, such a great partner, she created a lot of them for us. So it's but it's just been updated for this webinar, so all the links should be working now. And if they're not, just let us know and we'll just, revise that real quickly. So I am going to look at something maybe a little bit less engaging because it's not music. It's an inaugural speech by James K. Polk. But before we get to the close reading exercise, I would like to ask Kira to launch our poll question. And for those of you who can't see what the poll question asks, it says the territory won from Mexico in the Mexican-American War eventually became all or part of which states? And just click on all the ones you think were part of the Mexican cession. Your choices are Washington, Oregon, California, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, Montana, Wyoming, and New Mexico. So basically every state in the continental West. All right, I see half of you have voted. All right. And it looks like no one is voting for Washington or Montana. Everyone is voting for Arizona. New Mexico and Utah and California all have a lot of votes as well. There seem to be a few for Wyoming, Oregon, and Idaho. Do we have anyone who hasn't voted yet? Oh gosh, yeah, Colorado, I'm sorry, was supposed to be on the list. Amy, I must have forgotten. But anyway, so we're gonna end polling. Okay, so here are the results. And we will find out the answer in just a few minutes. So most of you are right to some degree, but there are a few little things that are a little bit off, and we'll explain why. Okay, so now I'm gonna share my screen. And okay, so you should be able to see our main TPS website right now. And I'm just going to show you where you can find this close reading exercise, because, you know, we have under tools for educators, we have all these different sections now. Some of these are new and recent. So under close reading exercises, you can find all the ones that we have created. And these are all from just this year. So we really went to town on this. And the one that we're going to focus on today is this one, James K. Polk and Manifest Destiny. So this is what it looks like. It's 3 pages, 2 excerpts, and an explanation. So what I'm going to do is kind of talk a little bit, you know, summarize real quickly kind of what it's about, and then kind of show you just a little bit of what the activity is. We don't have the time to really kind of get into the text, but it's enough for you to get an idea of how you can use this text with your students. It's geared towards 4th, 5th, and 8th grade standards, and it's differentiated a little bit in how it's set up. So I'll show you. So first of all, the actual document that we're looking at is a part of James K. Polk's inaugural address. He only had one inaugural because he was only elected to president once, and that was his plan. So he became president in 1845, and the Library of Congress, in its James K. Polk Papers collection, has the manuscripts where he wrote his address. But of course, you don't want to put a manuscript with 19th century handwriting in front of students and tell them to read it. So that's why not only do we have a transcription, but this first link is a link to the transcription in whole, which you can find from Yale's Avalon Project, which is a really great website to find text-based primary sources for important American documents. So this is where the whole thing is, but of course the whole document is way too long, so that's why it's excerpted. But you can see if you zoom in, those of you who actually like to read 19th century handwriting, which I know I'm in a really small club there, but right here my cursor is over "The Republic of Texas has made known her desire to come into our union." And so that's where we start with the excerpt. So at least you can show students a little bit of, here, this is what it looks like in the original. Now let's look at it in transcription. So basically, we have some background on James K. Polk, and this first link is to a resource guide, because the Library of Congress has one for every single American president. So this is what that links to. And then where it says he's a Tennessean, it links to a bio about him in the Tennessee Encyclopedia of History and Culture, which is another really good online source. And so basically, it's talking a little bit about the war with Mexico, and also the whole idea of manifest destiny. Now, how do these two things go together? Well, that's where the text will bring it out. Obviously, the idea of manifest destiny, that the US is destined by God to expand its boundaries because it's a chosen nation, because America has ingenuity and enterprise, that this is behind the whole idea that we have the right to get these new territories. They should belong to our country and not the places they belong to now. So that's kind of the manifest destiny is like the governing kind of national political philosophy behind a lot of these maneuvers at the time. And so this link for Manifest Destiny actually goes to a page at the Digital History site, where it's an excerpt from the John O. Sullivan very famous article, which is one of the first documents you think of when you hear Manifest Destiny. And one thing I noticed about reading this is he talks that one of the number one things he points out about why America is so great is because of equal rights and universal freedoms, which we all know was not as equal and universal as he's making it out to be, but because of course they are not extended to women or African Americans or Native Americans. But to hear them talk about it, it sounds like everybody is totally equal in America, and that's why we deserve to cover the whole continent. So that was the mindset. Okay, so so basically, for fourth and fifth graders, the link to provide them context for what they're reading is from America's Story, which I know a lot of you are probably already familiar with. This is for the reading level of fourth and fifth graders. So if they have access to a computer, they can read it. So Polk not only oversaw the Mexican-American War, but also the treaty agreement with Great Britain, which set the boundary for Oregon. So it was actually the treaty for Oregon that brought in Washington, Oregon, parts of Idaho and Montana, and parts of Wyoming, whereas the Mexican-American War brought in California, New Mexico, Arizona, parts of Wyoming, Utah, parts of maybe parts of Colorado. Gosh, I can't believe I forgot that. But and then of course Texas came in right before then. So all those states came in under James K. Polk's watch, but they were two separate kind of political acts. One was Oregon and one was the Mexican-American War. But anyway, so you have these 3 pages that talk about the idea of manifest destiny and expanding the nation. And I love how they mention at the very end, they throw in the, well, yeah, Texas and Oregon, you have to balance a free state with a slave state. So this issue of slavery, which actually was overarching in terms of like acquiring territory. Okay, so just, and then there's a different article for 8th graders that's at a little bit of a more difficult reading level. And then there's more context for teachers if they want it, which is a really nice, very short essay from the Library of Congress. So there's lots of links where you can get resources. So this is what 4th and 5th graders are to read. And if you want to let them also read the contextual notes that kind of help paraphrase things for them so they understand it better. And then 8th graders will read that as well as this second part. So for just 4th and 5th graders, it's just this one short excerpt where, you know, James K. Polk says, you know, Texas wants to join us. They were once a part of us. They were unwisely ceded to a foreign power. So this is this idea that, oh, was Texas, you know, a lot of Americans thought Texas was originally part of the Louisiana Purchase. So Texas originally belonged to America. Therefore, you know, it should be no problem and no concern of Mexico for them to rejoin us. Now, Texaco was, of course, not part of the original Louisiana Purchase. Parts of it was, but then I won't get into the details or anything there. But basically, Mexico had only gained its independence from Spain in like 1821, and then Texas got its independence from Mexico in 1836. And so neither of these things have been independent for very long at all. But Mexico never, ever recognized the independence of Texas. And so this idea that Texas can independently negotiate with the United States, no, Mexico did not believe that. But James K. Polk is going to go with that. And then he's saying, again, this is just our business. It's not Mexico's business. And of course, he's saying foreign nations, but he really means Mexico. And he's saying they have no right to interfere. And foreign powers did not seem to appreciate the true character of our government. And he's saying, our union is a confederation of independent states whose policy is peace. And so he's talking about this enlarging the limits is extending the dominions of peace. So therefore, the world has nothing to fear from military ambition in our government. Now, anyone who says that is obviously planning on invading you, I think. So basically, oh no, we're, you know, our military, our fighting source exists to preserve peace. And so you know, why would you fear us? We're just going to be spreading peace with guns, you know, but still. So it's kind of interesting the way that he chooses to talk about and to frame this issue. America is definitely in the right, and you don't have any basis to make your claims. And of course, he wanted a war from the very beginning, and he took this dispute. You know, not only did Mexico not recognize the independence of Texas, but it thought Texas ended at the Rio Nueces, and Texas was like, no, it's the Rio Grande. So Polk sends troops down there, and of course, when the Mexican troops enter that zone and fire, then he has the precedent that he needs to declare war. And it was a 2-year engagement with a very young Mexico. Mexico was not financially stable. It did not have the same kind of military forces and economic forces to draw on as the United States. And yeah, the US put that away pretty handily under generals who would later fight in the Civil War 20 years later. But anyway, so Polk, he's connecting this idea of expansion and peace like it's a given for America. And so it's kind of interesting the way that he talks about it. And of course, the further thought questions ask students to talk about what are the benefits of this expansion, and how does he prepare for this war with Mexico? Because, you know, they haven't declared war yet when he's inaugurated, but he pretty much is laying the groundwork very clearly for why the US is right to enter this war. So yeah, anyway, so this delves into that further, and it's a good way to talk about a subject that might be kind of boring for your students. It isn't hard to understand. So I am going to give this back to Kira, to show some more resources that we have for this.
All right, thank you, Stacy. So at this point, I want to share a couple of resources that we have that kind of take this the next step. So after the Mexican-American War and after we've acquired all this territory, what's kind of the next piece in this? And so I'm going to share a couple of things with you guys. Let's see here. Let me find, I think it's on this one. Oh, wait. Hold on. All right, sorry, I've got too many windows open on my computer right now. All right, so the Library of Congress has two primary source sets that you may have looked at some point. They have recently redone their teachers page, and so these look a little different. If you've not visited lately, definitely take a look at these. I really like the new design. So the first one is Westward Expansion Encounters at a Cultural Crossroads. And again, the sources they picked out here really can take this kind of that next step. What happened, after the U.S. has acquired all this territory? So thinking about, the railroads and building the railroads across the West, the different trails and migration of people across the West, and then mining, and then those kind of things. And so there's a really great collection of sources here that you can use to kind of draw in some of those stories. And as always with the primary source sets that the library has, they do have a nice mix of newspapers, text sources, oral histories, again, a good cross section. You'll note that they've also emphasized the background sections on these too. So again, this is a good secondary source reading for your students who maybe need a kind of condensed version to kind of give them some context for the sources that they're looking at. So you'll find that there. And then at the very bottom, some suggestions for how you might use these. And then they'll list out some additional resources. These are largely collections where you can find even more materials. Now, one thing that's in that primary source set that may be of particular interest, kind of going along with the Mexican-American War, is they link to the treaty that the US and Mexico came to after the war. And it's in a Century of Lawmaking collection, which, this is one you definitely want to take and excerpt for your students because it's a lot of course, text. But you'll see here, it starts here. So you have the English version on this side, the Spanish version of the treaty on this side. And you'll note that there are little side notes. So it kind of gives you a little snippet of what the content is for each of these sections, kind of the key point. So again, this is a really interesting source. It's in that particular primary source set. Now, another one that you might want to take a look at is this one. It's the Mexican-American Migrations and Communities. Because of course, something that, we haven't mentioned today, but, there were people who lived in these territories, and many of them, they were given the option once Mexico ceded the territory to the US, they could, move their entire families back across the border into Mexico, or they could stay where they were and they would be granted US citizenship. And they were told in that treaty that they would be granted all the rights of citizenship of the US. Now, of course, we know that there were issues with, racism and those kind of things and kind of how they were eventually treated. But, it is really interesting and a good point to bring out your students that, for many families, they didn't move, the border moved on them. And so, people of Latino heritage have always been in this country. It's just the border changed. One particular source in that collection that I think is really interesting is this collection of maps. Now, you'll note over here to the side that there are 260 pages in this particular source. There are 4 pages of these maps that I think are really interesting. And so this starts on page 55 of this document. And so what you find here at the top is it shows you this map of the US, and it shows you where the border is at in 1810. And if you notice, part of it is shaded. And so the shaded area here is essentially area that is not, they say is not inhabited. Of course, we do know that there are indigenous peoples who live in a lot of these lands. But what they deemed as inhabited, of course, being largely, white people. So you'll see how that's changed. And then as you go down, you'll note, again, here's 1820. So you can see again how things are changing. And then when we get to the next page, so you get these for like every 10 years. And so it's a really nice little time lapse. So you can see again how migration patterns, how people are moving west. And then you'll see, of course, notes here. So from Spain in 1821 by successful revolutions. That's kind of, again, talking about what's happening with this territory here. And then at the bottom one here for 1840, of course, now we're getting into this period of the Mexican-American War. So we have the Republic of Texas is noted, and you'll note that there's a piece here, from Mexico in 1836 by successful revolution. They're, of course, saying that, Texas seceded from Mexico, and then to the United States in 1845 by annexation. And then it notes over here for this other territory, of course, that it was, part of it was by conquest and purchase by the U.S. And then when you get to the next page of this document, again, it's going to take this further. And so we get to 1850. And again, we see now where the boundary is. So of course, we still have the Gadsden Purchase to get to what is, our current continental U.S. boundaries. But then we can see again how the migration patterns, again, where people are at. So again, this particular source I think is going to be really interesting, and it's a good kind of time-lapse piece that you can use with your students to again show this whole concept of manifest destiny and kind of the reality of how population moved. And so here, of course, by 1860, and on the 1861 too, we also see railroads. So again, this is a really interesting source that you can use. All right, let me, I have two more that I'm going to list that are on our slide, and I'm not going to pull them up. I'm just going to mention them, and I will email you guys the links for these in the interest of time. We have a lesson plan on our TPS MTSU site called Manifest Destiny: War on the Plains. And of course, the whole idea, that they had at the time was that there was all this empty land out west that was just ready for the taking. But of course, that ignores the fact that there were indigenous people who lived on those lands, and that was their home. And so part of the story, of course, then is the conflict that as more people move to the west, they come in conflict with the native people who lived there. So we do have that lesson plan that kind of explores some of those wars and the conflict that happened. And then we also have a primary source set on westward migration that gets into the various trails. So like the Oregon Trail, the Santa Fe Trail, the Pony Express, again, thinking about kind of how people and information and things moved to the west. And so again, it's a really interesting collection of sources that you can use with your students. So again, that's another kind of, again, if you're thinking about ways to kind of build out on this concept of manifest destiny with your kids, some different directions that you can go in. Now, we are going to be giving away a book today, and if October could, I meant to tell her to bring up our wheel to do this in advance. We'll come back to this in just a second as we wrap up here. So that gives her a moment to kind of pull that together for us. Lastly, also we have a survey. If you will, we'll drop this in the chat box. We would love your feedback. We are, of course, still working on planning for the spring semester, and we'd really like to hear from you guys about topics and approaches that you would like to see, things that you need, from us PD-wise or resource-wise, again, ways that we can support you as we're all making our way through the school year. So if you will take a moment to fill that out, you'll also see on that form, you have the option for how to request your certificate to get professional development credit for participating and or watching this later on, so that we will give you credit for that. We do have one more webinar for this calendar year, and that's going to be next Thursday. We're going to be looking at teaching with graphic media. And if you're interested in joining us for that, just let me know and I'll be happy to get you added to the list. So again, thank you guys for joining us today. We really do appreciate it.